right, and welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I'm your host, Courtenay, and I'm super passionate about moving and thinking. On this show, we are going to dive into all things health, fitness, personal development, lifestyle, and political, sociocultural. I've always been fascinated by people, and I love learning from the experiences and stories of others. This has been a treat for me, and I hope this is enjoyable and useful for you. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or any way that I can make this a better experience for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Hey, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, Courtney. Thank you for having me. I was looking forward to this. It's been a while. I know we talk a little bit on, social media or messages, but haven't really talked in person or seen you in a while. So happy to be here.
Yeah. Same. I know. It feels like it's been a lot more recent than it has because of social media. That's the world we live in. Well, and
it's interesting. I was looking back at some Instagram. I think Instagram pulled up a post, and it was like, I want to say almost 3 years ago or 4 years ago that we were training a little bit when you were coming into True. Yeah. So, and that's the thing. Time just, I don't know. I mean, obviously, as you get older, it goes faster just because of the fractionality of it. But I don't know. It just seems like time is just exponentially faster for whatever reason. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like the past, I don't know, what has it been, 9 months or whatever, have been a weird warp zone for sure.
Totally. Right. Yeah.
So, well, I'd love to, we'll have to make that happen again too, the training, but let's dive in a little bit. I want to hear a little bit about how you got into training.
Okay.
Yeah. Aaron is a fitness trainer. You go on. Yeah. How did you get started?
Actually been a trainer now for going on 15 years. So I kind of got into it, not necessarily by accident, but I worked out most of my life. I started really training when I was in high school, doing strength training. I played sports all my life. And so fitness, and movement and all of that has just been a part of my life ever since I was a kid. And so, when I went to a boarding school, which is where I really started doing a lot more serious lifting. And that's where I put on a bunch of muscle and really kind of got into it. And back then, this was mid late 90s was all still the bodybuilding, chest one day and arms one day. But, then I really got addicted to just working out in general. And once I left boarding school, I wanted to continue that path. And I would always have friends ask me, hey, what can I do to gain weight or lose weight or, get in shape or whatever, because they, saw that I was fit and that's what I was doing. Because actually, when I left for boarding school, I was skinny. I was 140 pounds. And when I got back, I was 180 pounds. So everybody's like, oh my God, what did you do? Oh, he's on steroids. No one could understand just eating well, putting in hard work and whatever. I was able to get, really fit. And so anyways, I had a friend of mine who was, I was talking to her on the phone and she was asking me oh, what can I do for my abs? What can I do to lose weight? And so I was kind of giving her some tips and she was like, you know what? She's like, you should be a trainer. And the funny thing is when I first moved out to California, I didn't really know what I wanted to be. I'd gone to bartending school. So I came out here to kind of do your typical, I thought maybe I could do some acting or something because I was a little conceited, oh, I'm a good looking guy. I could probably get a commercial, make all this money, and tried to do that thing and just realized I just, one, was not really good at it and not very passionate about acting in general. And two, it just wasn't really for me. So I was looking up jobs because bartending is hard to find a job bartending. I didn't have a ton of experience. So a lot of places were we're not really going to hire you. And so I started looking up personal training.
They audition you. It's crazy.
Yeah, totally.
In New York, that was a really rude awakening because I was oh, I'll get a job at a bar, cocktail waitressing or bartending. And they would have auditions. You'd have to show up with your portfolio. I had a modeling portfolio that I had to stand online to present to go get a job at a bar. That's
right.
Okay. But anyway.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? Because the industries are kind of tied together. Obviously, if you're bartending or waitressing or cocktailing in those cities especially, There's I guess the stereotype of actor got to look a certain way or fit the part to some degree. And the other part was the experience. Like I didn't have a ton of experience, so they're like, we don't have any experience really.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to get experience if I don't get hired. And so it was like this weird back and forth. And so then I started going to Craigslist, which when Craigslist was actually kind of still legitimate, I guess, or before it turned into, I don't even know what it is now. I've been on there in a while, but I've heard some bad things about it. But I was looking for a personal training job. It was like, oh, $40 an hour, be a personal trainer. I'm like, oh, that would be cool. And so anyways, long-winded kind of answer short. My friend, after she said that, then I looked online for personal training schools. And because I was like, you know what, I don't want to just do this in a weekend and get some Mickey Mouse certification. Actually, if I'm going to do this, I want to learn it and learn it well. And so I actually enrolled. It was a 6-month, 500-hour program that I did. Yeah, it was in Santa Monica. And actually I would go to Santa Monica down at the promenade, and they rented out this room. It was like this independent organization. The main teacher, she actually at one point was a manager at Equinox, broke off to start her own like independent trainer certification company it was called the NPTI, but it was all based off the NSCA handbook. And so, yeah, it was 500 hours. I was doing that for 6 months. I would go to SMC during the day, and then I'd run home, eat, go back to Santa Monica at night at like 6 p.m. We would start class. We would be in class for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, have a little break. Then we'd go over to the Easton Gym on the promenade. I don't even know if the Easton Gym is still there or not. And we would do like another hour and a half of like practical application in the gym. So that was 4 nights a week for literally 6 months. So it was a really, really extensive training program.
Sure.
And then basically at the end of that, some Equinox managers came into the classroom and were like, hey, we're opening a gym in Westwood. We're looking for trainers. And I was just about to graduate that program, and they were just opening. So kind of after the class, I went up to the guy's name is Keith, and I said, hey, I'm interested in a job. And he's like, okay, cool. Gave me his card, and then went and had an audition, and kind of the rest is history from there. Started at Equinox, and then there's a whole nother backstory with all of that too. So that's how I got into training.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I love the kind of stuff that you do because it's very mind-body oriented. Like,
yes,
you don't, which is, I think, somewhat unique. Like a lot of people do more of just like they focus just on the physical.
yep.
As you know, like that, my whole thing is around the integration of mind body. So I
Totally.
really love that. Can you talk a little bit about your foray into some of that kind of training and why you're a believer in it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, to your point, in this again, I love to talk, so I may ramble on if you need to cut me off or interject for sure, because I'm very passionate about this, and so I
Right.
just love to talk about it. Yeah, the mind-body connection. So in my opinion, the fitness industry is still lacking in a lot of ways. And I think to your point that it's a lot of times almost mindless exercise, and it's just looking at the body. It's like, oh, just do 20 reps of this exercise, or I just want bigger arms, or I just want to be toned, or it's very much, and don't get me wrong, obviously fitness in the fitness world, there's a very much aesthetic component to that. People want to look better, and I don't fault anybody for that. I like looking good too. I like being lean and strong, and obviously looking a certain way. I believe obviously as a trainer too, you need to look the part if you're gonna be that way. But yeah, in my opinion, what happened is I just I think a lot of it branched from my own personal experiences of I started having like panic attacks and really bad anxiety, and going through like a pretty kind of severe bout of depression. Um, I've had anxiety most of my life, and kind of was never really conscious of it until it really started hitting me hard when I was having like full blown panic attacks.
When did those
And
start?
what's that?
When did those start, the panic attacks?
It was, let's see, it's 2000, about 7 years ago, 7 years ago. I was going through kind of a pretty trying time in my life, just in terms of personally, in a relationship that I was in that was kind of falling apart. Family stuff, my parents and some other family issues were really happening. Job at Equinox, some of that was happening. There was just a lot of a lot of things that were going on, a lot of turmoil in my life, and so I started getting like chest pains, and that's when the anxiety really started kicking in, and then the panic attacks. And I would wake up out of like a dead sleep, like just heart racing, sweating like crazy. During the day I'd have panic attacks, and then I kind of fell into a depression with that. And so what happened is I started going to all these doctors, right? Because I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with me.
They're awful. Yeah. Anybody who hasn't had a panic attack is very lucky, and they have no idea. Panic attacks can be debilitating. They're horrible. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Especially too, when you wake up out of sleep, dead asleep, wake up just full blown like panic attack. And so I was going to all these doctors, and actually at the time, my the relationship I was in, the woman I was with, she was very much into psychology. She was trying to get me to see a psychiatrist, and trying to get me on medication, trying to help me, to no fault to her, she was trying to help me. And so I saw a psychiatrist. They wanted to put me on Prozac, and at the time I'm like, Prozac just seems like there was this stigma around it of like, I don't feel like I need Prozac. And so I was like, is there like a lighter version of that? And then all the other doctors I was seeing were like, there's nothing wrong with you physically. You're healthy. You're this. One of the doctors was basically like, oh, it's just anxiety. Here, take, gave me Ativan basically. And so, I had an endoscopy because I'm thinking maybe I have an ulcer and all this other stuff going. I had a couple echocardio or EKGs and an echocardiogram. I had pretty much every test you could have, I had, and they all came back, quote unquote, normal. Right. And so that's when the psychiatrist was like, well, let's try, whatever. So they put me on, can't remember what it was, Celexa or Lexapro or one of those. And that actually made me worse. And that was like by far one of the worst experiences I've ever had. I was having suicidal thoughts. My chest pain was way worse. The depression was like through the roof. And so at that point, that was kind of towards the end of this journey of me trying to figure out what was going on. Right. And so I said, you know what? I got to figure this out. I'm going to do this on my own, basically, because I'm not getting the answers I need. So that's when I started looking into holistic, more natural healing. I started looking into changing my nutrition. That's when I started looking into meditation and neurology and movement therapy and breath work and all this other stuff, to where before, me, and I'd been a trainer for many years before this. I mean, I'd been a trainer for 7 or 8 years before I started down this journey. And that was where I started, a lot of that stuff that I started looking into, I'm like, before I would have chalked up to like, it's just hippie stuff, like energies and frequencies and meditation and all that. I'm like, it's BS. Like, and then I started applying it to my life. And that's when I really started, kind of circling back to what you're talking about, the mind-body connection, and really started looking into the nervous system and stress and emotions and meditation and breath work. And then not only that, how everything is so connected, the mind-body connection, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, everything is so connected. And muscularly, whatever, from your big toe to your head, we're a global organism of ecosystems. Your respiratory system, circulatory system, endocrine system, vestibular system, all of this stuff has to work together and interplay together. Yeah. And so from a fitness standpoint, I started stumbling on some pages like Applied Movement Neurology. They're based out of the UK. Obviously, Z Health is another one. They've been doing it for a while. The Carrick Institute, Integrated Kinetic Neurology. And I started just looking into some of this stuff and going, wait a minute, like, in my opinion, this is a big missing link when it comes to fitness, because people are coming to me, obviously as a fitness professional and other trainers, not just for physical, but there's a whole nother side that we're missing, which is the mental and the emotional and the spiritual. And we need to really start looking into that when it comes to how people get results, how they get out of pain, how they function, how they deal with everyday life. And so then that's when I really started looking into the neurology of like the eyes, the vestibular system, the cerebellum, the proprioceptive system,
Yeah.
and how that connects to everything and actually can enhance or hinder our performance. And not only that, not only performance from a physical workout standpoint, but performance from an emotional standpoint, from with your kids or your husband or your wife or your job. How your stress relates. Not only that, the other parts of that, how do you handle emotions? How do you handle attitudes and beliefs? And your mindset, do you have a positive mindset? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? And so I just went down this rabbit hole of all the mental, neurological, but then how can we start linking that to movement? And so that was where I started going, wait a minute, like trainers are missing a big piece of the puzzle, in my opinion, if we're not looking at these things. Because what was interesting, so I watched one of your clips where you're talking about your eyesight and the glaucoma and some of what you went through, and how even the eye that you can't really see, you still can pick up light and dark and peripheral, and how you're getting a lot of feedback and information from that. And what's really interesting is like, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say people who are legally blind still depend on their sight more than any other sense to function,
So
for basic functionality. Yeah.
yeah, and that was the point I was going to make is, so 80% of the information we process from our environment is through our eyes. 80%. And so what happens is you process that information, or so it's three things: input, processing, output, right? So if input is, let's just say, inefficient or can maybe a little faulty, or it's just there's maybe a small issue or a big issue, could be whatever, then that processing is going to be less efficient. So therefore, the output is going to be less efficient. So when I started looking at and started talking to other trainers and even my clients doing the vision training, but also vestibular training, because again, that's very important because it's so linked to the proprioceptive system, and then the cerebellum, and then the frontal lobe, and just looking at how all of that interplays with movement. Go ahead.
I'm visually impaired. I'm hearing impaired. I had fine and graphic motor impairment as a child, and I was born with hypotonic limbs. So all of this is why I believe in the power of movement to heal, because I always say I feel like movement in so many ways literally saved my life. And when I say that, there's actually the whole emotional component. We'll go back to that, but even just literally, physically, physiologically, I'm not convinced that I wouldn't be somebody walking into walls if I didn't have some sort of movement foundation. Yeah.
I believe that 100% as well. Movement is medicine. I love using that hashtag quite a bit. And to me, I've seen it in myself, because that journey that I was talking about with you before is I've gone, and most of it has been done through movement, meditation, breath work, and a lot of that, obviously nutrition, like you were saying, attitude and emotion, which is, a whole nother component to it. But yeah, I mean, just through movement alone, I've been able to heal a lot of just internal stuff, but also external stuff, injuries and whatever. And yeah, for someone like you, I'm a firm believer that giving your body the right type of stimulus, it can really help in a lot of ways, more than sometimes maybe we even know, to the point of like, had you gone down a different path, I think that, to your point, yeah, there's a possibility that maybe you wouldn't be as high functioning, as you are, given, the stuff, the stimulus that you've given your body, given, some of the inefficiencies and setbacks and stuff that you've had to overcome and deal with. And, I mean, I've definitely seen it anecdotally with my clients when I have, one of my guys, he's had spinal cord injury. He's got a fused cervical spine, a fused lumbar spine. His left side of his body, his motor control, motor function on his left side is very compromised. And we've done some cerebellum work and some vision work and some vestibular work. And he's doing stuff that he wasn't able to do for the last 20 years, like stuff that you and I take for granted, or most people, like putting on a sock, right? Making a fist, being able to turn and look, or having better peripheral vision, better reaction time. But I swear every week he comes in, he's like, tells me something he's doing that he wasn't able to do before. And he calls it magic, but and I'll have him do stuff instantly. Yeah. I mean, instantly you'll get results. And now some of these things are temporary, but you can affect the nervous system instantly and enhance it. And it's a push-pull system. So throughout the day, and even for you and everybody, vision is a skill. It can change throughout the day. Obviously, over time it changes. And a lot of what I've looked into with the eyes is not only the intraocular muscles, but the extraocular muscles. But very much so what happens with the eyes is they become tired over time because we don't train them, we strain them basically by staring at screens and looking either here or here. I can't tell you how many people hardly ever bring their eyes up here or over here. And so I start doing eye work with people and they're like, oh my gosh, like one, they've never done this before. And two, what I try to tell people with the brain, the mind-body connection, but the brain work and the eye work, this is like strength training and mobility training for your eyes and for your brain, because the brain is plastic and moldable. You can strengthen it and change it and develop it at any age. Now, granted, obviously, the older we get, the more information and the harder it is to make those changes in some ways, or do some synaptic pruning and kind of go in and then regrow new pathways or whatever. It obviously becomes harder as we get older, but it can be done at any age. And then again, the vision, the eyesight, training the muscles in and around the eyes. And I tell people it's just like any other type of training. You can't go in and expect to start, squatting 300 pounds. You have to start slowly with this stuff. And, that's a big part of what my philosophy now is, and, when we were training, I didn't really know most of the stuff that I know now and that I'm applying now. And so I think it'd be really cool to obviously take you through, some of the stuff, more of the stuff that I've learned now.
Yeah.
But it's my, and it's funny too, because I was doing it a little bit with you in terms of like kind of the resting stuff, which I know you weren't necessarily a fan of, because I feel like I was trying to rest you too much. And you're like, no, I just want to push. But, and which is fine. And, people thrive off that. And I love that. But I feel like what I'm trying to do now is build a foundation when people that come to me, whether you're an athlete or not, we need to kind of go in. And I use the analogy of like either remodeling a house or like, in LA, it's popular, buy a lot, tear the house down and build a new one. So for me, it's like, we got to start with your foundation and then we build from there. And the foundation, in my opinion, is the nervous system and strengthening the nervous system. When you give the nervous system the right stimulus, it's going to give the body the ability to then perform better and function better, because your nervous system and your brain will only give you so much strength or mobility or whatever that it feels safe with. If it doesn't feel safe, it's going to take something away, and usually that's going to be mobility or strength. That's for a bunch of different reasons. It could have been from physical trauma, mental trauma, emotional trauma. There's a lot of reasons why that's the case. But I believe that I'm a part of what I'm trying to learn and do is learn how to tap into that and kind of build a more robust nervous system, but give people their movement back in a way. So, but yeah, I mean, that's, excuse me, that's, in I guess a nutshell, why I've kind of, the mind body stuff is like, went through my own stuff, started looking into, the meditation and the neurology and how everything's connected. And it was like this light bulb that went on. I was like, holy crap, like, this is amazing. I want to learn as much of this as I can and start applying it to, training and movement. So
I love that you call it movement. So I don't know, for people listening, I have a show, it's called WIM, What is Movement? And I always say all human beings are designed to move. The ways in which we do are our unique creative expression. Aaron is going to be on my show when we do in the next season. But I am so conscious of calling it movement. A lot of people have asked me that, like, why do I call it movement as opposed to training or exercise? And for me, it's because I believe that it is a creative expression and that all bodies are designed to move. Even people who are paralyzed communicate with their eyes. They're still moving. There is movement. That is it's integral part of being human. And I
100%. I mean, it's our natural kind of intrinsic value of what our brain essentially is designed for complex movement. Our brain was developed over time for us to be complex movers. So yeah, 100%.
And so I think when people, they get locked into this idea of like exercise, workout, and that actually takes away some of the benefits of what movement provides. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And like, why do you call it movement? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. So exercise is a man-made concept, right? Exercise is something that we created to fit in this box, basically, or gym, to kind of
literally
go through these repetitive motions of, over time. And for whatever reason, I think it got skewed over time, and obviously with the with technology and the ability with, like, let's talk even in the 70s and 80s, when you start getting movies and you see people like Arnold Schwarzenegger and whatever, and so the culture becomes around what is popular or what is seen. And so to me, over time, it became this very much aesthetic approach of mindless, and again, I be careful because I don't want to offend other movers and fitness enthusiasts out there, because I definitely, I did the bodybuilding stuff, I did all that, but to me, it's this exercise is this boxed mentality, to whereas movement, to your point, is this freedom of expression. Our bodies and brains are designed for movement, and that's it, really. Complex movement at its simplest form, which is, walking, running, climbing, moving things, building things with our hands, building tools, whatever it is all designed, it's intrinsic to what we, and then dance too, where you start looking at dance and rhythm and the cerebellum. And I read a book called This Is Your Brain on Music, and they talk about movement and dance and some of that, how this whole idea that music was just this like made up thing that really has no value to us, which in my opinion is not true at all. And he debunks it in the book, because we have what's called, or part of it is what's called entrainment, which is that rhythmic value of movement that's just naturally in us. Some people express it differently through, dance, through movement, through, yoga, whatever it is. You can even do it with kettlebells or other stuff. I kind of made a post about that. But yeah, I mean, to me, I call it movement. And same thing with training. I say train movements, not muscles, because again, this goes back to the mind-body connection, but also the performance chains of the body, the fascia of the body, the tissues, joints, ligaments, everything is connected. So when you start trying to isolate those connections, yeah, you might build strength or muscle, which is, fine if that's all you're trying to do. But movement, in my opinion, then starts to suffer a little bit, becomes inefficient and compartmentalized, to where if you're training movements, you're training your whole system much better, in my opinion. And so that's where I started looking at a lot more of the body weight training, which, has to deal with, more gymnastics style movements, or the movement method, animal flow, which, whatever. But, getting into that type of stuff, crawling, rolling, DNS, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, getting down on the mat, relearning how to move as when you were a baby. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I start looking at as movement, is for the neurological system and the nervous system. So to me, movement stimulates those things. Exercise is fine, but again, I think that's, again, a man-made definition of what inherently is movement. So that's kind of, and like, to your point, I've changed my terminology over the years, of one, just as I've learned more and become more educated, just in I guess the areas that I want to focus on, or the pathway that I'm going. Just movement to me is the expression, movement, and just looking at, and that's another psychological component to fitness, is how do we talk about these things? What are the words that we use? Like when I have a client, I've changed how I kind of phrase either cueing, or for example, like saying, oh, my bad shoulder, or your bad shoulder. Maybe we say, oh, well, that's just your inefficient shoulder, or, kind of looking at ways to to use terminology differently.
I never say my blind eye or my bad. I always say, like, I'll say my stronger eye, or, you know, the one that doesn't see as well. But I hate, like, I never want to say it's a blind eye. I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that kind of goes, you know, along the lines of the terminology that we use to about obviously talking with ourselves, because unfortunately, I feel like us as human beings, we're very quick to go to the negative. You know, in our own minds, we're very quick to talk negatively, and even if it's unconscious and inadvertent, to the point where you've gotten to the habit of saying my bad shoulder or my bad eye, or, you know, these negative kind of connotations towards, you know, how we describe ourselves or what we're doing. And same thing with my clients when I'm talking to them. You know, I'm very much trying to use different terminology, you know, in different ways to kind of elicit responses and attitudes and beliefs around. So like I'll say your movement isn't bad, it's inefficient, right? Or it's, you know, maybe there's a compensation or an imbalance. It's not like, you know, something that we need to correct. And that, even that the term corrective exercise now has started to change, where it's like, well, there's this idea that we're trying to correct something. No, the body is good at correcting itself. It just puts itself into these compensations or imbalances that over time can lead to issues. But there is, it's not, you know, I you know, I was guilty. I use the term corrective exercise. I still do sometimes, but like, again, you know, I think this, going back to your point with the terminology of movement, for me, it's changing the vocabulary around fitness and health. And so using terms, you know, movement and different things like that is a part of that, you know, so.
Absolutely. I want to address something you said, because you were saying how you didn't want to offend anyone. You know, I think this is a very interesting discussion in the fitness industry. I mean, the reality is most people do go into fitness for aesthetic reasons. That's usually what draws people. I personally actually don't oppose it. I think it's a pretty incredible thing that we have this thing called vanity as human beings. None of us are inviolable. You know, none of us escape that. We all have vanity. We all have ego. I think as a culture, what's very interesting is I'm seeing this like huge fear of vanity and ego, and this you know, making them pejorative, and that we should really look down on it, when the reality is, you know, yes, hubris and narcissism are negative things. We don't want to aspire towards those. However, ego and vanity, in many ways, can save us, and they are very much an integral part of being human. And I think that it's, you know, it's a great thing that can actually save our lives, and that can give us something to aspire toward. But all this to ask my question to you, how do you think that is, like, do you see that, what do you see from people, like clients you've worked with, who maybe that was something that drew them? And then, you know, how do things change? Do people stay for those reasons? And also my second part of the question would be, in terms of as a cultural thing, you know, what are your thoughts on how that's become pejorative, and that we don't want to focus on that, and that it's negative, or the opposite side of it, people who take that way too far and that's all they care about? Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, obviously there's a lot to kind of dive into with those. I think, you know, again, to what you're saying, your point, and what we kind of mentioned is, first and foremost, you know, it seems like most of the time people get into fitness, you know, or hire a trainer. Not all the time, because a lot of what I'm doing is now more pain management and injury and stuff. But a lot of it is the aesthetic. I want to lose weight, right? I want to look better, and which is fine. You know, it can be a motivator, but I feel like the fitness industry has kind of, you know, what's the word I want to use? I mean, supported it so much where, or kind of exploited that so much that that's become, and in my opinion, it started again with the bodybuilding era in a lot of ways, of like, you know, hey, you just got to look good. You just want to, and for guys, it was always like, just want to be big, walk around with muscles. Girls, you know, wanted to be toned and lean. And it's like, for me, the aesthetics are, for my training, the aesthetics are secondary. And what I try to tell people is, aesthetics will come when you put in the work. when you dial in your nutrition, when you constantly, or you consistently move and start doing a program, you're gonna lose weight, you're gonna build muscle, you're gonna get leaner, you're gonna get stronger. Those things are gonna fall in place. But when you have a society and marketing strategies and shows like The Biggest Loser and all these other things, especially Instagram now, and a lot of this where it's like, oh, 30-day shred, 60-day boot camp, get six pack in 6 weeks, like
for everything. Yeah.
right. We're bombarded with this idea that that's all fitness is and should be, is that or I got to lose 10 pounds before my wedding. It's like, well, what were you doing for the last 5 years?
Right.
Now all of a sudden for the next 6 weeks, you want to try to lose 15 pounds and create some kind of, in a way, almost unachievable goal. And you're going to put more stress on yourself. You're going to probably work out too hard. You're probably going to burn yourself out, get injured. You're going to be super sore. You're probably not going to like the process because you think you need to kill yourself to get in shape. And it just becomes, then it becomes almost this negative thing of like, oh, well, I gotta do all the stuff I don't want to do to get to kind of a point that I'm probably just going to let go after the fact that I get there. And for me, there's a quote that I always use, or I use a lot. It's like, we overestimate what we can do in a day and underestimate what we can do in a year.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's this idea, everybody wants a quick fix. They want the pill, they want the fat burner. They want, again, like I said, these quick 6-week programs to get in shape. And, to me, that's where we're missing the point. Like, this is a lifestyle. This is not a quick fix. This is not an overnight thing. And the aesthetic part of it will come if you just put in the right work and you do the right things and you follow the right program and you have more of a manageable, healthy, we used to call them SMART goals, Equinox's term, smart, manageable, attainable, realistic, time manageable. And, for me, so a lot of people that have come to me, generally in the beginning, I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to lose body fat. I want to do this. I want to do that. And a majority of my clients over time that have stuck with me for a while, what they start realizing is they start dropping the weight and looking better, but they start feeling better. They start sleeping better. Injuries start to go away. They're functioning better. They had a meniscus problem that they had for years that's now getting better. Now they're out skiing black diamonds, or they just maybe went through a divorce and they're getting back on the dating scene, and so all of a sudden they lose some weight, they get confident, but their energy levels are better, their libido is better. There's 20 other things that are better besides the aesthetic. Now, don't get me wrong, the aesthetic can fuel some of that, right? You lose 10 pounds or 20 pounds, you're going to go, wow, all right, cool, look at me. I feel good. And it could be a neurological component of benefit to where you start to build that pathway of benefit, because the brain is kind of doing one of two things. It's either perceiving something as beneficial or something as like dangerous or negative. So until you can create that pathway of benefit to where your brain starts kicking in going, hey, you need to do this because it's really good for you, then it's not going to stick. And there's ways that happens. One is aesthetic, obviously looking better. So now, and the endorphins and dopamine, and now again, one would say, okay, well, now we're affecting the nervous system. So maybe the gut is healing, serotonin is better. So mentally and emotionally now, not only physically are you building that confidence, but mentally, emotionally. But so anyways, back to the aesthetics again, it's, in my opinion, it's still too much of what the industry is focusing on, and too much of, I feel like, what people kind of get into fitness sometimes, or get back into fitness, or create these goals around that. Just, to me, it's perfect example. I have a new woman that just started training. She's like, this is the worst shape I've ever been in my life. I used to be, this way. And I've had a lot of people that do that. They've come to me after years of being out of shape, when they used to be like, I used to work out all the time. I was a gymnast. I was super lean, blah, blah, blah. Now I just, I don't know what happened to me. And it's like, well, we got to look at what happened over the last 5 years. Did you change your job? How was your relationships? There's obviously a lot of reasons why that happens. But she comes to me, very A-type personality. I want a six pack. I want to lose weight. I want to do it next week, kind of thing.
Right.
And so, part of my job is to temper those expectations, but also create an attitude and a belief around, like, look, if you follow what I have you do, and obviously I'm not going to sit here and say that I know it all. If I don't know something, I research. I have no problem referring. If I don't know something, I will tell a person and I will do my due diligence to try to figure it out for them or find a reference or whatever. And I encourage all my clients to not necessarily just take my word for it, but to look more into it. But if you follow what I have you do and we kind of get all of those things in place, you're going to lose the weight. You're going to look better. You're going to get leaner. The aesthetics are going to come with that. And it doesn't have to be the sole focus.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess one of the main things now that I'm trying to do is let them know, like, hey, so I'm reading this book called You Are the Placebo from, do you know who Dr. Joe Dispenza is? I'm sure you've heard of him. Yeah. So, yeah. So, looking into that. So it's really about creating an attitude and a belief around what you're trying to do, which is then going to get you the results they want. If your attitude and your belief isn't cultivated around the fact that it's going to happen for you or you're going to achieve that or you're going to get there, then you're probably not in a lot of ways. Now, again, that takes work. It takes discipline. You have to cultivate that and you have to work that, over time to be able to get there. But what my whole thing is with my client, especially her, this new woman who she's focusing so much on the aesthetic, is I'm trying to cultivate this attitude and belief that, hey, if we get your nervous system under control, because she's had a lot of stress. She's dealt with her father passing recently and business stuff. She had a serious breakup. So over the last few years, emotionally, mentally, physically, she's been put through the ringer. Yeah. And so right now she's kind of just focused on the aesthetic. I said, look, she's got neck problems and she's got lower back problems. And I said, if we don't take care of these things first and get your system right, there's no point in me trying to just kick your ass and kill you for the next 2 or 3 months so you can lose a few pounds. Right. I'm trying to create this attitude and belief that if we tap into your nervous system and we smooth out some of these inefficiencies and imbalances, get your gut functioning better, get your emotions in a better place, work on breath work, get your diaphragm and your nervous system and all this in place, you're going to get the aesthetic results better and quicker and faster. And it's this domino effect. It's not just one piece of the puzzle. It's very multifaceted and integrated. And so when people come to me for the first time, that's what I'm trying to do, is relay that information that, yes, I understand the aesthetic. I will take your body fat. We will set that goal that, we can lose 6% body fat in the next 6 months. But I also want to make it realistic and let them understand, because there's this notion that they should be able to lose weight and body fat in a month or 2 months. And I'm like, right. What people don't realize is, go ahead.
Like, how long did it take you to get here? It's probably not going to happen in like a tenth of that time. Yeah.
Exactly. 100%. And that's one of the biggest things I talk with people too, is I'm like, okay, how long has your knee been hurting you? How long have you been in this situation, or how long has this been going on? Sure. Many times it's been years and I'm like, you're not going to fix a problem that's been going on for years overnight. It's just not going to happen. And so, if I can, with my people, start to at least help them to kind of, take this information in and absorb it and embrace it, that hopefully, as they stick, not hopefully, I mean, I've already proven it with many of my clients, as they stick with me, the results are going to come. And the aesthetic point, I guess the one last thing with the body fat is, people think that they need to lose all this weight and body fat. And I'm like, what people don't realize is if you lose 0.5% to 1% body fat a month, that's really good progress. Right. So let's say you lost you can now, I'm not saying you can't do it faster, because you can, but let's say, and this is the example I give people, let's say you lose 1% body fat a month. Well, in 6 months or 8 months, you're going to be down 6 to 8% body fat. Right. For most people, that's huge, and that gets them down into the range that they should be in. Right. And so again, it goes back to my quote: we overestimate what we can do in a day, we underestimate what we can do in a year. Psychologically, people don't want to hear this is going to take 6 months or a year. We don't wrap our heads around that. Same thing with like saving money, right? Most of us don't realize, well, if I just put $50 a month away, in the next 5 years, I'll have saved X amount, thousands of dollars. And it's the same thing, with the body. I just told my client, I said, you're putting money in the bank every time you're coming in and as the months go by. unfortunately, we're not really wired that way psychologically. And now, given the climate where we're in with our attention span, and now, and Amazon yesterday, and Amazon, right now, and Instagram, our 8-second attention span, and quick fixes, and like I was saying before, all this stuff. It's unfortunately, really hard for people to kind of wrap their head around the process, and the idea of just the aesthetics will come with the work, but doesn't happen overnight. So,
Totally.
and I don't know, I kind of went on a rant there. I kind of feel like
one of the
so I
things
don't know
that you
if
said
I
that
answered your question,
confirms what I really do love is that I feel like, yes, I wish that it wasn't the thing that people came in for, but what I love is that it draws people in, and most people find so much more in the process.
Yes.
If they stick with it, that may have been the thing that got them in the door, and which is why I don't shame it, because I'm like, hey, if that's the thing that got you in the door, you're going to find so much, like the benefits are way beyond anything you thought possible, So I really love that people find it, and you're talking about this, like that they're finding all these like emotional benefits, these, certainly the biological health marker benefit. And then, I mean, just some of this other stuff that I think is, new in the science, but also just that people don't think about. They don't realize how much that, like that training, that movement work translates to other areas of their life. I'd love to hear some of, you talk a little bit about like your client with the spinal cord injury, but I'd love to hear a little bit about too, just even like the day-to-day mindset, because I know that translates to other areas of life, and I'd love to hear some of your experience with that. Yeah, working with people.
Yeah, I mean, and quickly kind of going back to your point too of getting somebody in the door, and a lot of this stuff, when I talk to people, I'm like, in a way, I don't care what you do, just move, just find something that you're going to like. And if it is going to get you in the door because you need to lose 10 pounds, well, cool. Then it's my job to help you expand that and realize like, hey, and real quick too, I want to touch on, what you're talking about, like the hubris and the ego and the flip side of that. Cause I've done a couple posts of that, of, posting me with my shirt off, because I'm pretty lean, and, it's, how do people perceive these things? Now, obviously perception is very subjective. We all, and there's a quote I like, it's like, your perception of me is a reflection of you. My reaction to you is an awareness of me. So going back to like the hubris, the ego, some of that, a lot of what I've tried to do, even though, I mean, we're social creatures. We want acceptance. We are in groups. So we do want people to give us praise, and we want to hear our name being spoken. We want to hear that we've done a good job, or that we're inspiring to other people.
Yeah.
So I feel like, to your point with the aesthetic, that's kind of been my message with some of this, is like, okay, when somebody posts this, like, what is your initial thought? And I think a lot of it comes down to, and this was the point I was making, not about me personally, but the message that's being put out there is if you're confident and you're putting yourself out there in a positive light, it's okay, in my opinion, to maybe show off a little bit, or show your hard work and your dedication.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is it's not just, I don't look at it as like just showing off. To me, it's any athlete and anybody who has worked hard at anything knows that it requires work. There's work, there's discipline. Those are the results of your efforts. And I think people should be proud of the work that they put in. That's not something that somebody should hide, or people should take pride and ownership of work that they've done. I think that's the fruits of your labor, right? That's something I believe very much in. And I'm an advocate for people, reaping the fruits of their labor. Absolutely. So.
Yeah, and what I think too, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about mindset and how we speak to ourselves a lot. Yeah. Most of the time, we don't give ourselves credit for the things that we've done and the accomplishments we've made, or it's not enough credit. It's like, okay, well, what's the next thing I can do? Right. And so that's kind of, I think to your point, what you said too about maybe some people that maybe take it a little too far, where now it becomes this obsession, and it's very ego driven, and it's narcissistic, and it's like, either look at me, or I'm better than you, or or from your own personal standpoint, not being satisfied enough that Now, don't get me wrong, that can sometimes be a good thing if it drives you to want to be better, but it can also be a negative thing if it's always what's next. If you're always living for what's next, you're never going to be happy. If it's like, well, if I can just get here, I'll be happy. No, you won't be, because when you get there, you're going to go, well, now I'm here. What's next?
Right.
And that's fine in a healthy way. Now there's that balance too of like, how do you kind of balance that out? How do you give yourself credit? How do you want to reach the next goal or look for the next goal without kind of going off the deep end so far that it becomes this obsession and this thing where now you're sacrificing, maybe your friendships or better than, or, continue to move on or whatever. And same thing, the aesthetic part of it.
The sound seemed to, the sound cut off. So let's just repeat that. But yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can. Let me make sure mine. Yeah. Okay. I can hear you. Let's
okay. I was just basically saying, looking at kind of, I guess, the obsession of it. Isn't it an obsession? Is it a healthy obsession, or is it something that is maybe not so healthy that can be affecting other areas of your life because you feel like I just always have to do better, or I have to be better than, or you have to maybe step over other people or step on people's necks or whatever to get to where you need to go. And obviously in the fitness industry too, I was guilty of it a lot. You see, people getting maybe attention, and I've been very guilty of this, where I feel like a lot of what I do is very unique, and I don't maybe get the attention I deserve on social media sometimes. So I went down this hole of, I see these pages with thousands of followers, and they're in my opinion kind of shit. And so what I've had to do is check myself and be like, you know what I need to understand is I just need to put my message out there. If it resonates with 1 people or 1,000 people, cool. Now, granted, I would love to reach more people. I would love to have a huge following and reach 10,000, 20, whatever it is. But at the same time too, I have to check my ego with some of this stuff and go, you know what? Just do what you do, give people credit, fine. Maybe they're helping people. Maybe they can, you see a video and cool. Yeah, I can do that, but it doesn't mean I have to take, it's that quote of like, dimming somebody else's light doesn't make yours shine any brighter type of thing. So there's definitely been a struggle and work for me in that sense of being humble and just, checking my ego a little bit and putting my message out there, but still being confident and give myself credit and being positive, having a positive growth mindset, trying to be inspiring and motivating, showing off that hard work a little bit, showing off my skills a little bit, because I do really like when people go, oh my God, how do you do that? Or, you look great.
You do amazing things. So
we all do. So, yeah. So anyway,
be able to do those things. So yeah.
Right. And the accomplishment, I think that's a big part of why I got into the calisthenics and the handstands and a lot of that, because to me, it's another level to attain of, like, okay, I kind of achieved all this. And in my opinion, a lot of the weightlifting, or at least for me, it's kind of gotten boring. So I'm kind of like, all right, how can I kind of scratch this itch of really wanting to kind of take it to the next level? And so that's where I started looking at these complex skills and really trying to hone that stuff in, because it's humbling at the same time, because it's like, this stuff takes years of practice and dedication to be able to really do, as to do handstands and levers and do these things. Muscle ups, these things take years to accomplish in some cases. And so, for me, that in and of itself can be very humbling and kind of checking my ego, but also very rewarding when I accomplish one of those skills, or I get better at one of those skills. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of touch back on a little bit of that. And then, as for the client stuff, and, like you were asking about, my client with the spinal cord injury and some of that. So what I've gone back, or I guess what I'm really a lot more interested in now, is helping people like him, and helping people that come to me that have maybe a lot of injuries or a lot of imbalances or a lot of inefficiencies. And, like I was touching on before, is when you start providing this stimulus in the right way, and the neurological stimulus and the vision training and the cerebellum training and all that, you just see, again, some of it is anecdotal, just from what I've seen just one-on-one with people, but I mean, a lot of this stuff is proven through science, through neurology, that you can affect physiologically, emotionally, whatever, through, these neurological components. But when I take somebody like him who has very, inefficient motor function on his left side and start seeing the change over time, he's been training with me for a year now. And like I said, so he's doing stuff that he hasn't been able to do for the last 20 years of his life. He's lost a ton of weight. He's moving better. He's stronger. His balance is better. His energy is better. He's sleeping better. He's, like I mentioned before, he can actually put his own sock on. He can do stuff that he just wasn't able to do.
That's amazing.
And he gets, he's like 63, 64, and he lights up like a little kid too when he's like, Aaron, this is something I can do now. And to him, and he even still tries to go, I know it's not really that big a deal. I'm like, no, dude, that's huge.
Huge.
For you, these are big things, which to us and to a lot of people can seem like stuff we take for granted, or it can be small things. For certain people, these things are huge. I mean, these are their whole world. And again, this goes back to the neurology of it. Now you've created that neural pathway of benefit to where the brain kicks in and goes, wow, this is working. I need to keep doing this. So they're more likely to continue to do that. Now he's foam rolling on his own. He never foam rolled before. He's like stretching on his own. He's doing his brain drills and eye drills that I have him do like every day on his own.
Oh my God.
He's like, and I love seeing, and that's what I love about a lot of this stuff is seeing my clients kind of take off after, like, usually it's about 6 months to a year, to where they've completely changed most of their habits. They've changed their nutrition. They've changed, their sleep cycles. They've changed a lot of things, and now they're reaping the benefits from it. And that's why I love to do what I do. When my clients come in and say, oh, I did this, or, one of my clients had meniscus problems. We got him through that, and he was out skiing black diamonds. He's like, oh, I was doing your vestibular drills before I would go down the slopes. And like, or I've had clients that I've trained for like literally 2 months that'll message me a year later and say, hey, I'm still doing that hip drill you showed me, and it's really helped me. Or, hey, I'm still doing those eye drills. Or even people I don't train that have seen some of my videos and go, oh, I started implementing those eye drills or that breathing technique, or they'll hit me up and say, hey, what can I do for this or that? And so, that's been, I guess, the reward for me in the message, especially with all the neurology stuff, just seeing how much it's helping people.
Yeah.
It really reaffirms, why I'm doing it. And it's still just not very mainstream. It's not, most trainers don't know about this. A lot of therapists and physical therapists don't know about this stuff. But so, yeah, I don't know if that was kind of your question about.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm a huge believer. Even I think a lot of the science wasn't there when I was little, but we certainly did so much of it. I mean, I spent 2 hours a day with a patch over my eye. I mean, I had a patch over my eye every other day of my childhood, over my strong eye, but I spent 2 hours a day, every single day, doing eye exercises. And then I would do vestibular training with the patch on my eye, have to walk on a beam, and I didn't have hearing aids yet, so I did so much of that. I also, did little, like I would be in a wet sandbox and have to try and reach for different toys. That was mostly for the hypotonia, but it was also for proprioception, for, vestibular training. It was all of it. And, again, just to reiterate, like while so much of the science and the specific stuff that you're doing now, which is way more advanced, wasn't around, but, we did variations of it. And I truly believe it is why I'm here today and functioning at the level that I can function today. So yeah. I'm a huge believer, and I'm so glad that, like, it's so exciting to me to see you doing this kind of work with people and to see where this goes and that people are benefiting. And yeah, I think it's incredible, honestly.
Well, and I think too, I think luckily for you, in some ways, you had people around you that for whatever reason were able to get you into that or do that or have that knowledge to help you. Because unfortunately, I think what happens is it's very specialized is what's been in the past, to where you go see one person for vestibular, you go see one person, and it's very much clinical, very specialized, maybe very specific your diagnosis or to, what's happening with you, which is fine. I mean, I think that's great, but it's been a very much specialized clinical thing that hasn't been able to be put out in more of a broader sense, and more of a stimulating sense for just people in general. Because I've definitely heard of kids who maybe had hyper conversion, and they do eye drills and stuff, but then once it's kind of fixed, it's over with. They don't continue to do those things. Or it was at childhood, and it was because it was specialized through a clinic or through a hospital or through a special doctor. And then once it's kind of done, it's done. You move on through life. And then, unfortunately, a lot of that stuff, even now though, I had like a friend of mine, she has MS, and I started talking to her about saccades and doing some of this stuff. I'm like, have any doctors ever done any of this? She's like, I've never even heard of this stuff. So unfortunately, there's still a lot of people, even strokes. So like my dad had a stroke about a year and a half ago. And, they weren't really doing any type of this training with him. They would have him come in and do some basic kind of balance training, some other stuff. But here's, a crazy kind of anecdotal story with my dad. So it affected his right side. His stroke affected his right side. And so one of the drills that I really love to do is what's called a saccade drill. And saccades have been clinically proven and have been shown to help people with TBIs, traumatic brain injuries. So concussions, strokes, that type of stuff. And then there's your cerebellum. So the cerebellum, I'll go into that just very quickly. The cerebellum is Latin for little brain. Cerebellum is basically your brain's control center. And what's cool about the cerebellum is it's 10% of the brain's mass, but it holds 50% of the brain's neurons. So it's like the control center for the brain, basically. It's the kind of the last thing until it starts going down the pons, medulla oblongata, into the spinal cord and all that. But what people don't realize is a lot of times we think of cross-processing of the brain, left eye to right hemisphere, right to left. Well, in actuality, what happens is the left eye cross-processes, but the right cerebellum actually affects the right side of the body and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And so with my dad, what I had him do is I had him do a little bit of a cerebellar drill, and I had him do a saccade drill. And he went from, he wasn't able to write his name. He did those drills and was able to write his name, like immediately after those drills. And what was crazy was we were remote, so he texted me. He was like, "Oh, Aaron," he's like, "I just wrote my name." I said, "Was that after you did the drills?" He's like, "Yeah, I just did those drills, and now I'm actually able to write my name." And so, just that, and like I said too, with what I'm doing with my client Jeff with the spinal cord injuries, who has these breakthroughs daily, basically every session we have. Other clients that, I have them do an eye drill, and all of a sudden their mobility opens up and they can touch their toes, or shoulder mobility increases, or whatever. It's just, to me, this is kind of, the missing link, and these things of like, how it affects your whole system is just, it's just amazing to me. So
it's truly amazing.
Yeah.
I want
to, back to that point with you is I want to help kind of bring this to the masses of hopefully, looking at just training from a different lens, than what we've been doing. So, but sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. We're going to do a win session, and you're going to actually show some of the stuff you do, because I'm super excited about that. If you're open to that, I would love it.
No, I would love to. Yeah. The more I can get this out, the merrier, for sure.
Absolutely. I want to do a little bit of a segue. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on, because you are so into you really understand this whole mind-body connection, and I love that you don't address movement and training from just the physiological. You're talking about your clients, and it's, it's really all about their lifestyles, the whole picture.